to Life Under Deborah's Palm. Today we're going to continue with the dementia portion of the program, and I am going to hit on stage 4, and I'm going to give you tips and tricks to handle what becomes an issue in this stage. So stay tuned. Stage 4, the first thing I'm going to tell you is the stages cross. Like, you can read where it'll say stage 3 does this, stage 4 does this, stage 5 does this, but the truth is they're going to intermingle. So you're going to see stage 2 and 3 mingle together, you're going to see 3 and 4 mingle together, maybe even a little 5. You're going to be in 4, still see 3, maybe see 5, maybe see none of what they tell you to expect, because it doesn't always work that way. Not everyone gets the exact same symptoms of the disease. Some people get very angry and agitated, others never do. It's just crazy. So the first thing I'm going to do is read you some of the symptoms, and I have notes because I just couldn't memorize everything. So according to the experts, stage 4, difficulty concentrating, forgetting recent events, unable to manage their finances, can't travel to new places alone, socialization problems where they want to withdraw from family and friends. The physician can now detect the cognitive problem. No kidding. Like, the whole world can figure out there's a problem. And of course, my favorite, they're in denial of the symptoms. And if you've seen my other videos, you've seen it's called anosognosia, and that is going to be your biggest nightmare. So I'm going to go through a couple of things that we saw with our family, and then I'm going to tell you how we kind of learned to manage those things, and I'll give you a couple tips at the end. Yeah. This stage lasts about 2 years, according to the experts. You know, everything's kind of relative. It could go faster, it could go slower, but they figure the average is about 2 years. The first thing I'll talk about is the difficulty in concentrating. And I saw this with my mother, but I didn't realize that this is what I was looking at. My mom, who had always taught me as a child not to interrupt someone when they were talking, began to interrupt everybody, like dead sentence, and what she was talking about had nothing to do with the conversation. So somebody could be going on about, I don't know, the latest thing in the weather, and all of a sudden my mom, you would see her, she'd kind of just like stare kind of blankly, and all of a sudden she'd go, "Oh my gosh, did you know that on the news today there was a giant house fire and blah blah blah," and just literally cut people off and change the direction of the conversation. And she had no clue she was doing it. She had no clue she was being rude. This went on actually for quite a few years, and I could not figure out why my once wait your turn mother in the course of conversation could no longer wait her turn. It was just weird. And I did notice, and I really feel like that is the lack of concentration, where there's a conversation going and at some point she checks out, or she catches one little part of the conversation and her brain goes in another direction and then comes up with something and then just blurts it out even though the conversation's long since left them. I didn't realize that's what it was. The forgetting of recent events. I did not really see that with my mother, but their short-term memory is going to start to go really bad. So, and that's going to start to get really frustrating and very difficult. Unable to manage their finances. My mom didn't really have this problem in this stage. It didn't come till a little bit later. She couldn't balance her checkbook really well, but she did pay all her bills without any problems. They can't travel alone to new places. That's kind of a no-brainer, and sometimes they know that and they'll kind of get a little like, "Oh yeah, I don't know if I want to go," or especially if they have to go alone, or they might ask to get picked up, but they may just kind of like go, no, I don't think I want to go. So you might have to really get yourself cued in on some of that and what they're really telling you in their behavior, and that's kind of the hard part sometimes. Difficulty completing tasks. I didn't see this. I didn't see this with my mother. I didn't see this with my mother-in-law. I suppose that would come with a lack of concentration, where you start something and then you just don't really finish it because your brain goes somewhere else. But we didn't see that. They also say that what I said before, the socialization problems, where they seem to withdraw from family and friends. My mom did not do that. My mom loved people, and she still loves people, and she's very popular in her assisted living community because she loves people and they love her. So that never happened to my mom. She didn't want to miss things. She was glad to go to family things and whatever. But my mother-in-law really did start to get like that, and our suspicion is we weren't understanding that she had it, and she was truly afraid that we were going to separate them because my father-in-law had it, and they were really, I think she was really afraid that we were going to take Dad from her, you know, and split them up. And here comes the worst thing, the denial of the symptoms. As I've said, it's called anosognosia. It is what is going to frustrate you the most, because what comes with that is nothing's wrong with me. I don't need to take my medication. I'm the one who's right. You're wrong. The doctor's wrong. The governor's wrong. Everybody's wrong. It doesn't matter who they are. They're wrong because they're right. And this is where things are going to get difficult. This is where the anger comes in. This is where the arguments come in. They will do things like misplace items, lose items, they're somewhere in the house, who knows where. But what happens is they begin to blame other people. So, for example, one year when winter came, you know, and my mother said to me, "Oh, can you bring back my snow shovel? I don't have your snow shovel." So I could argue and say, "I don't have your snow shovel, Mom." I learned not to do things like that. I said, "Geez, Mom, I don't remember borrowing that, but let me check on it." And she's like, "Yeah, absolutely. You guys took my snow shovel and didn't bring it back." And so what happened was I kind of got her doing something else in the house, and I went and checked the garage in the basement, and I found her snow shovel because, of course, we didn't have it. So, and then I brought it up and I said, "Here, Mom, I got it." And she said, "See, I knew you had it." Yeah, of course I had it, Mom. But there's no point in arguing. It's not going to go well for you if you are going to argue. It's just, unless you have to argue. I have been in appointments where my mother has given incorrect medical history. She had to be corrected. She could sit there and argue all she wanted, but she had to be corrected. It was medical history. They'll come up with the most absurd things. They'll come up with crazy answers to things. So she was like, "Can you come over, or can you ask your husband to come over, and there's squirrels running around in my attic, and they're getting in from the hole where the bird's pecking." No, there's no squirrels in the attic. There's no birds pecking. So that stuff's really hard. And we went out there. I said, "Mom, can you show me the hole so I know what we're doing?" There was no hole. The caulk had turned gray. It had turned this grayish color from white. My husband went and got a tube of white caulk and smeared it all over and made this weirdo mess and said, "There, does that look better?" And she said, "Oh yeah, absolutely. They'll stay out now." Okay, Mom, so we waited. We had no more squirrel complaints. She never had them to begin with. We just don't know. The other thing, the squirrels were not nesting in her gutter. I guess they were hanging out on her gutter, and she's like, "No, they're getting in my attic." They're not, but the hard thing is they want to call the exterminator. So this is where things are going to get really, really hard. I suspect that the reason she thought there was a hole there was because the caulk had turned gray. Your brain, everything you do, your sight, your appetite, your hearing, everything is processed by your brain. I wonder if her brain wasn't seeing kind of a hole, or the shadow started to play tricks on her. I don't know, but it will get that weird, and they will make up just total lies. My mom had a problem with her phone, which ran through the cable company, you know, the modem, the digital phone, and she's like, "My phone doesn't work." Mom, okay. Well, I called them and they couldn't fix it, and they said my phone's broke and there's nothing they can do and I need a phone. She never called the cable company. This is where you're going to have to get real discerning. She never called the cable company. And what happened was, as in a lot of digital things, sometimes the modem just needs to be reset. So here's how I handled that. So when she was all flippy that she called and nobody could fix it, I just went, okay, Mom, well, tell me what's going on. And so I picked it up, and sure enough, it was like something was weird. So I said, okay. I said, I'm going to take a look at it for you, okay? And she was still, it doesn't matter. You can look if you want. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's broke. It's broke. It's broke. She chased me all over the house. I went downstairs to the modem, unhooked it, gave it the 30-second reset, plugged it back in. The phone worked fine. Went upstairs. There you go, Mom. Your phone works. Oh, that's great. But, they were here and they could. And she just kept going and going and going and going. And she would tell stories like that. She'd be like, I called the town. I called the police. I called the fire department. I called the cable company. That's what you're going to start getting into. They also go through this thing of, and my mother, who was never like this, did this. My mother-in-law, who was like this, did this. We call it the amazing case of one-upsmanship, where you say something and they know the next thing. No matter what I would say, my mother was like, Mom, I think it's this. No, I called this person. Like, my God, she's called the President of the United States and got the facts right straight from him. Things like that. And I'll tell you this, because it's a great story. My brother-in-law called me one day and said, do you know who the number 1 draft pick for baseball was this year? I thought there was a local guy who was headed to the big leagues, and I said, well, was it this guy? And he said, no, it was my mother. Okay, he had visited with his 2 sons who had been playing baseball and were in their uniforms, and she got talking to them, and she was not going to be outdone by her teenage grandsons. And she said, well, I used to play professional baseball. Really? My brother-in-law said, wow, really? What position did you play? Oh, I don't remember those things anymore. But they get like that weird. You're going to find out everything's broke. The microwave's broke. The phone's broke. The furnace is broke. The air conditioning's broke. Everything they own is broke. And the truth is, they don't know how to use it. They've forgotten something. And in that, they're still well enough to start calling the repairmen. And that's kind of the tough part too, because they come and of course nothing's wrong. And maybe they told you, maybe they didn't. And what happens is you end up, if they're living independently, which my mom was, having to drop everything and run over before they call somebody. My mother-in-law flipped out because she heard this beeping in the house, got real scared. It was like 9 o'clock at night. And she's like, I'm calling the fire department. We were like, no. We were sure it was a dead battery beeping like in a smoke detector. It was actually a carbon monoxide detector. Thankfully, she called a neighbor who came over and figured it out before we got there, before they called the fire department. That's what goes on. My mom went through a thing where she just couldn't figure out the switch between the heat and the air conditioner. And so if the house was too hot because she had flipped the wrong switch, she would assume, well, the air conditioner's broke. I need to call these people. And you know what? They didn't fix it the last time they were here. They weren't there, and it's not broke. So I was constantly, whenever we were there, we were always flipping the switches to kind of keep the house the right temperature. And then she went through a thing like goes on and probably a whole lot of us do, where at night during the winter you turn your house down to maybe like 63, and during the day you turn it up to 68 or 70. And then the season changed, and she would still turn her house down to like 62 or 3 in like June and July, and her house was like a meat locker. She's walking around freezing. And my brother was up that year, and he actually said after several days he finally got her to understand that. That's another thing we saw during this stage was, now it was taking multiple times, multiple explanations to get something to click. but at least it would click. It might take you 4 or 5 times. You might have to reword things. You might have to restructure your sentences, lower your vocabulary, really come down to a lower vocabulary, and speak slower. Speak a little bit slower, gives them a minute to kind of catch and process things. So now that you have all these fun things, I'm going to tell you what you're going to do and how you're going to start to handle this. And this is how it's going to be from now until the end. So here's what you're going to do. You are going to lie, 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 and lie some more. You're going to lie your shorts off. All those things your parents told you about being honest, Abe, and telling the truth, those days are over. They're long over with a dementia patient. They actually have a name for it. They call it therapeutic lying. There's a reason for it. There's no point in correcting them. Unless, like I said, you're in the doctor's office and it's a medical history issue, there are things obviously that need to be corrected. But in general, you are not going to correct them. I don't tell my mother anything. My aunt actually broke her hip. It's her sister, and I don't tell her. I did not tell. Now my aunt's recovered, but we never told her that she broke her hip because my mother will become very upset, very stressed about it. In fact, to the point where sometimes they'll take it as the disease progresses, they'll take it further and think that they died of it. There's no point. There were things we just simply did not tell her. Just didn't tell her because it's so stressful for them. Correcting them, don't bother. If my mom got up and said, "Oh, I have to go off to work today." "Oh, okay." You don't go. You're 80-something years old. You spent most of your life as a housewife, and you're not going to work today. That's just the stupidest thing. You have dementia. You don't even remember those things. You go, "Oh, you are, Mom? Well, that's good. Let me just help you. Why don't we have a snack, make sure you get your coffee, your tea, we'll get your lunch together, we'll pick out some clothes," and redirect. You're going to lie and redirect, and lie and redirect, and lie and redirect, because that's how your life's going to become. And that's the best way to handle it. Yanking them from reality, or their reality, let me put it this way, yanking them from what they believe is true into what's really true doesn't matter. It really, all you're going to do is confuse them, make them angry, upset them. I will tell you a story from when we first put my in-laws in assisted living. There was a woman who worked in the recreation department who told us a story of a woman who was a resident who got herself all dressed, got her purse, got her coat, went downstairs into the lobby, and an aide came through and said, "Oh, so-and-so, I see that you're all dressed up. Where are you headed today?" And she said, "Oh, my husband's coming to pick me up." And here's what the aide said. "Your husband died 15 years ago. He's not coming to pick you up." The woman collapsed to the floor in grief because she had no idea her husband had died 15 years ago. It was brand new to her. They're going to get to a point as it goes in the later stages, and it happens to every one of them. I have never seen this not happen. They start looking for their parents who have usually been dead for decades. Who cares? "Oh, okay, yeah, my mother-in-law would ask about her mom. Have you checked on my mother?" And we'd go, "Oh, yeah, we saw her the other day. She's doing really well." "Oh, okay, well, someone's taking care of her, right?" "Yeah, absolutely." She's been dead for 50, 60 years. Don't do stuff like that to them. Just forget it. Forget the truth. Just forget it. Go with what they're in. Redirect them. Get them ready for work. And then, I don't know, find something else for them to do. It will make your life a lot easier because it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Here's 2 things I'm going to tell you that I found helpful for me. Number 1, lose the word remember. Do not put that in your vocabulary. Get rid of it. Tell your family and your friends you are not to say that word in front of my loved one, Because if you say, well, don't you remember the time we went to blah, 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 or did this or that? Stop. They don't remember. Or maybe they do. So here's how I'll word things. If I want to say, we had a camp and we had a lot of fun at camp. And so instead of saying, oh, Mom, remember when we had the camp and we did this and this and this? I'll say, I remember being at camp and the time that we caught this really big fish, or whatever the story is. They may remember. They may remember camp and have their own stories. They may just make stories up and go like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. And it could be a total lie. It doesn't matter. Engages them in conversation. And if they don't remember, sometimes they'll just, oh wow, really? I'm glad you had fun. Okay, do not say remember, and make sure everybody that's in contact with them stops saying that. The other thing that I found really helpful, and it may be really helpful to you, this has to do with managing doctor appointments, and my mom had a lot of them. And what happened was, when she was well, she had a calendar that she wrote all her appointments and the time and when she was going. And what happens is, you get the call, oh, by the way, you have an appointment on blah, 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 whatever day, and it's usually at least 2 days before the appointment. And I had to take my mother. She wasn't driving, but she would call me and say, I have an appointment tomorrow at 1 o'clock with whoever. Okay, no, Mom, it's not tomorrow. It's the day after. No, it's tomorrow. They just called and told me. Or she would get confused and say, no, they canceled my appointment. And she would get so confused. I would end up calling the doctor, finding out when her appointment was, and finding out that what she thought they told her, or sometimes she would catch it on an answering machine, was very untrue. So what I did was I went through all her doctors and I said, you are not to call her with reminders. You're going to put my phone number in and you're going to call me. I took everything off her calendar and I told her like the day before. To save my sanity, I just canceled all that. I took everything off her calendar and I just simply told her the day before, by the way, Mom, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we're going to this doctor. And that seemed to work so much better. So hopefully some of these tips and tricks and stories help you. And the next time we'll talk about stage 5, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. But that's how it goes. Nothing you can do about it. Have a great day.